up, everyone? Welcome to another episode of KIEREACTIONS. I'm Kieran.
It's Christina.
And we got to go on for you today. We're going to be doing a review on the movie M3GAN that was released in 2023 of January. And, just actually seeing the movie, I thought, I had some high expectations, but, I thought it was a good movie. It was good. Not great, but good. In my opinion, this is a spoiler review, so, if you haven't seen the movie yet, don't watch the video.
So, in terms of analyzing this movie, it's very important that we actually go through the plot.
Yeah.
So, in the beginning, we had this little girl named Katie who is driving to this ski trip with her parents. Unfortunately, on the way there, they get into this freak accident that kills the parents and leaves Katie an orphan. However, she does have an aunt named Jenma who took sole guardianship and custody over her after her parents' early demise. And when doing so, they kind of started out a bit rough. There was a bit of tension because Jenma is like, she's observed to be a workaholic. She's not very social, and she doesn't really know how to approach Katie in terms of raising her or just just talking about the accident in general.
Not to mention that she's working at a high-tech facility of robotics that's working with this toy company.
And for this toy company, she's working really hard to get financial support from various investors. And the main goal is to try to make their brand so complex and advanced that no other company could copy or steal their products. And so by doing so, she introduces the prototype M3GAN, who is introduced to be an android who essentially is designed to almost, take over parental responsibilities and be there for the child.
I believe so. But in a way, it didn't sound like a bad thing at first, and then later on, we're not going to get there yet. So,
long story short, prototype did not make a good first impression.
No.
Not at all. And so she was going to scrap it. But when Katie was showing interest in her aunt's work, she's like,
introducing the robot Bruce that she built in college.
Yes.
It really sparked an interest for Katie, saying that Bruce was one of her first creations that she did in college, and explaining the
raw features.
Yeah, explaining the raw features in the android itself, explaining the weakness and all that, which foreshadows later on.
And Katie, she really loved it, and she was like, if I had a toy like this, I would never want another one again, which inspired the aunt to continue working on her project despite it getting horrible feedback and not being very receptive to the investor. And so she ended up making it anyway. They bring back their boss, and unbeknownst to him, they already made the prototype. They completed the prototype, at least somewhat. Not everything was functioning, or at least put in the works, but they have a basic foundation for M3GAN.
And they gave it a test run for Katie, which actually sparked an interest for her, making her happy, and M3GAN starting to look after her as her guardian. But later on, that's when things start to go a little haywire. So
Katie really has a deep connection with M3GAN.
Yes.
And because, as the therapist put it, it was really just more of she just needed someone to talk to, especially after the accident with her parents. And so by doing so, she almost distances herself from her aunt. And the aunt notices this, so as a result, she starts making a bit more of an effort to connect with Katie, but she does see the problems in that function. And over the course, we see that they run into many other issues in terms of the outside world and their ultimate reaction to M3GAN being out and about. Because again, this is a prototype. No one has no idea who M3GAN is and just sees this as some weird doll.
Except one of those people that actually decided to steal the work and wanted to sell to another company just to make profit. But
she essentially reprograms her initiative to protecting Katie at all costs, regardless of the consequences behind it. So this leads her to going on a huge killing spree, covering it up, acting like nothing's wrong, and eventually the aunts connecting the dots because everything's seeming a bit too much of a coinky-dink. And so she realized that Megan's actually dangerous.
So Katie starts acting a little aggressive towards Genma later on, but Genma actually explains to her that she lost her parents and you know, it's normal for her to feel that way, but Megan is just making the situation worse.
Yes. And when she tried to turn her off, it was already too late. She got the power necessary to be able to put herself in control. But, you know, eventually Bruce comes back into play.
Katie realizes what Megan is doing to Genma, and that's when she activated Bruce, fighting Megan, and that was pretty amazing, like how Katie was in control when Katie activates Bruce, that was mentioned earlier in the film, to fight off Megan and stop her from committing all these crimes. But unfortunately, Megan does get free, turns on Katie, and attempts to kill her. But together, Genma and Katie both took her down. With Megan destroyed, Genma and Katie reconciled. With the police arrived outside their doorstep, and as they leave the house, Megan is, you know, I think she's still alive, you know, taking over the security camera system that she had in her house.
She kind of evolved.
She kind of evolved, yeah, and to have a mind of her own. She's still alive.
She's dead, but not dead. We'll see.
Yeah, I don't know. Now back to the movie review. I gotta say, Megan is good, not great, but good. There are a lot of good moments, like, you know, Katie was feeling down from losing her parents, you know, becoming antisocial with Genma, being antisocial with everyone, including the therapist.
Yes.
To the point where Genma realized, you know, she has to do something about it, but it's very hard for her to connect with her work and everything else aside from her.
That's where I disagree. I feel like in the beginning, Genma was so oblivious in terms of how to raise children.
Well, it's not her fault. She works at a high-tech robotics company, and, you know, she has a lot of work ahead of her. So I have to agree, I didn't connect with her in the beginning at first, but then later on, she started connecting towards me, and I was like, okay, she's not bad. I understand where she's coming from.
Yeah, but the thing is, I don't really see it as, like, I felt she was so distracted by her work, and she was just, like, completely at a loss in terms of raising a child or, like, dealing with this set of trauma, that she didn't really see Katie as, like, someone who needs that support or, like, that emotional support. She's like, oh, you know, I like the idea of having her around, but she definitely was not prepared for her.
Yeah.
And so I feel like her introducing her to Megan was not really a way of, like, oh, let me just use this robot to help Katie cope with her parents' death. I think it was more of like, hey, let me introduce Katie to this robot because she's the only child I have on standby.
But then later on, that's when the problem realizes that...
Yeah, she used that as more of like a benefit, but she didn't really realize
that Megan's actually, you know, taking over Katie's life to the point Katie's starting to aggressively act rude towards Genma. You know,
she grew too much of a dependence on her.
Yeah. I like the relationship between Genma and Katie later on in the film, and it was pretty amazing. The characters I really loved. Genma, at first I didn't fully connect with her in the beginning, but then I realized, now I see where she's coming from. She wants to take care of Katie, but apparently she hasn't raised children before, and it's really hard for her to actually cope with her work and raising the child that, you know, her sister died and everything. I wish they could have added a little bit more to Genma being aware that her sister died, you know? I feel like...
Yeah, they kind of like left, the only like connection was made was like the therapist like, hey, were you close with your sister? And then she's like, why do you ask? That's none of your business.
Yeah.
And then just kind of left it at that. I felt there's been more that could have been spoken on the relationship between
I mean, who
her and
knows?
her
There could have
sister.
been like a deleted scene or something, but then again, we're gonna have to see. But
Yeah,
back to
because I personally felt that there might have been some type of distance. Because as you know, like, she wasn't really too close to Katie.
yeah,
Like, she's like, oh, you know, I gave you a gift last year, where's your iPad? You know?
Mhm.
But it wasn't like, you know, she didn't even know how to approach or start in terms of being around Katie.
that is
So
true.
I felt like as sisters, they weren't close enough that that she was able to really bond and be much of an aunt to Katie,
Yeah.
even before the parents' death. So I think maybe they had an argument or some type of falling out. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows? But I really also, Katie, you know, I could kind of relate to a little bit. I kind of see where she's coming from. I don't really fully blame her for acting aggressively towards Gemma later on, because, you know, M3GAN, you know, Gemma created M3GAN just to, you know, make Katie feel better, but then it has an opposite effect.
Katie, I felt that the relationship between her and aunt completely understandable, especially given the circumstances. And surrounding therapists, I felt that was also reasonable. Basically, like, her being so young and going through as much trauma that she did, I did not expect her to be making like full-fledged connections and being like, oh, I'm happy, I'm bubbly, I'm cheery. You know, I fully expected her to act the way that she did. And in terms of her using M3GAN as almost like a crutch in terms of dealing with her problems and her inner turmoil, I felt that was only natural of her, especially her being so young and constantly looking for some type of guidance. But I did feel at some times that Katie's character was a bit off. Like, at least for me, I felt like it was a bit strange how she never, like, she's like, did you push Brandon onto the road? And then, like, you know, M3GAN just didn't, like, she didn't even deny it. She was like, oh, we learned a lesson that day. You know, that's such an off answer that I would have, like, I'm surprised that she never said anything about it. Like, hey, you know,
I mean, you saw how Brandon acted, so I probably wouldn't have said anything either. But
yeah, but I mean, I would have been like, you know, at this point, she's already dealt with death. I don't think she wants to bring more death into the picture,
I get
too.
where you're coming from.
And so I would have been like, hey, you know, I feel like M3GAN is a bit off in that sense. You know, but then again, I could, on the other hand, I could also see her as, like, loving M3GAN so much she's willing to kind of overlook the obvious, or at least be in some sort of denial, so that she doesn't have to give up on the one thing that's like really helping her. So I kind of see it, but at the same time, I felt like that was like really my only issue with Katie's character.
Yes. M3GAN, I really liked her character. Like, she gone from a sweet, loving, caring android to a sociopathic killer android, and that's what I really liked. I really liked how she was a little overprotective at times, to the point where she goes a little over the top.
Yes.
To the point where she starts killing people just to protect Katie. But yeah, her character I thought was pretty crazy. Like, especially that dance in the hallway.
Yeah, I felt that was also another thing that I found. I felt that some of her behavior was just completely random. Like, she just randomly broke out into songs to almost like dismiss conversations.
Yeah.
And I also felt that the dancing thing that she did in the hallway was also kind of weird. Like, it didn't really serve as a distraction.
Yeah.
It was just like, you know, the boss was already looking for her anyway. So I felt like she could have very well approached him, you know, or just kept walking towards him until she got the knife.
I guess because the knife was like near the fax machine and she had to get it. And
yeah, but the thing is, he was already looking for her. So I think she could have just like easily just walked up to him and like act like she was coming towards him and then grab the knife and then just run after him. You know, I thought that would have made more sense. I feel like her dancing in the hallway, it gave her a bit more of like a childish element and it kind of made her seem like a little bit more creepy, but at the same time, there's no real connection to the plot. So, like, in terms of her behavior sometimes, and it wasn't really explained. So I felt like that was something that was like, that's something that they could have worked on a bit more in the movie.
Yes. We already explained the good moments that were in M3GAN, but, you know, since we did explain our good moments, I do have to mention some dishonorable mentions from the movie that I kind of expected. Like, this movie was produced by Blumhouse Productions, right?
Yes.
And they worked on other movies like The Conjuring and everything else. I expected the movie to have a bit more gore, but it's like they cut, but they definitely cut most of that out. Like, for instance, Brandon's death, I appreciate it, by the way. He got what he deserved, but I feel like him getting run over by a car, in the movie, like, you see him in fear, seeing the car was about to hit him. Then it immediately cut to a wide shot of him getting ran over, M3GAN watching from a distance, and him getting covered in a body bag. I feel that, and especially with the neighbor getting killed and the dog getting killed, I expected a little bit more gore. You know, for me, a guy that appreciates horror movies, you have to know, I appreciate a lot of abundance of gore in horror movies, like the Saw franchise, the Halloween franchise. Hostel, yes.
You know.
But I do feel like the gore should have been a little bit more over the top, but it's like they toned it down, and that's what I didn't like about it. And that was just kind of a little bit too much.
I feel like they definitely could have been a bit more creative with like some of like the death scenes.
Yes.
And like her murder spree. I felt like it was just a bit too like, I guess, generic in some sense. Like, oh, you know, she caused person to, you know, like she framed someone for murder. Like she made it look like an accident. You know, I felt like they could have like been a bit more, I don't know. I felt at some points like it was just missing something. Like the trailer made it seem so much grander than it actually was.
Yeah.
That I was expecting a lot more out of the horror scene, but it was just like, oh, it's basically what the trailer showed.
Yeah.
So either the trailer showed too much, or they just didn't execute that well in post-production.
That's another thing I wanted to mention. The scenes in the movie, I felt it was a little, it was okay, but the trailer actually had great shots, in my opinion. Because when I look back at the trailer and then I look back at the movie, I feel like the trailer had more greater shots than it did in the final cut in the movie.
So you're saying it didn't make it to the final product?
I feel like it didn't in a way, but it didn't take away my interest away from the movie. I still thought it was good. However, I feel, you know, the clips could have been, they could have been a little better in creating the death scenes and everything else. The last dishonorable mention that I wanted to mention was like the ending. Like, I feel like it was a little too cliche. Like,
I feel like the second they introduced Bruce, everyone saw that coming.
Yeah, not only that, but the ending, like where M3GAN is destroyed, everything seems like it's back to normal, but then you realize M3GAN, you know, is alive. She's dead, but not dead. She's alive in a security camera system. I don't know. That ending kind of seemed a little, you know, cliche for me, but it was still good. I feel like she should have been at least alive, and when they were, let's just say this. If Genma and Katie reconciled a little bit more, and if they were about to go to bed, let's say Genma repaired herself, Ultron style, and
I mean, if I were them, I'd just go
and
off
kill them in their sleep, and then M3GAN would still probably
But that's the thing, she doesn't really have like a vessel. It's kind of like almost like, what's it called? Like Annie, or almost. Like there's no vessel. Like there's nothing that she could really do except cut the lights. You know, and turn on some music every now and then. But at this moment, she's kind of like dormant in this state. Like she can't really do anything. you know, I guess she could probably cause trouble,
Yeah.
like randomly call the police or, you know, something like that.
Yeah.
And make them look bad, ruin their lives from the inside out.
I feel like the ending
but
was...
nothing crazy.
I felt like the ending was good, but a little too cliche. I was like, you had my attention in the movie, but then it turns into a little bit of a cliche. You know, it's kind of taken away from me, but not too much to the point where I disapprove of the movie.
Yeah, this is
I really do like it still, but you know.
This is how I thought of it as. I like it. It did not exceed my expectations as an individual film.
Mm-hmm.
It actually did not meet my expectations at all. In terms of how I thought the movie would be. But at the same time, in terms of the genre and like the general direction that this movie was going in, it kind of, you know, it stayed in the box.
Yeah.
It didn't go outside the box, but it stayed inside the box.
Stayed
like,
inside the box.
You know, like, oh, it's just like, oh, we're introducing this android AI, but then as they're learning the real world and interacting with society, they gain more experience and knowledge and curiosity, and they decide that they know what's best for humans, and then they try to, then they have this, like, God complex and want to do, like, this ultimate, like, preservation theory, or, like, and then it's like, oh, like, this is like better off, like, we're better off doing this, and you know, it ultimately leads to the death of other people because they think like, oh, necessary evil, let me just kill you to get out of the way to reach the ultimate goal. You know, it was just, and then there's like, oh, they'll be back, kind of thing at the end. I felt like it was just like, it just kind of hit those, like, you know, it just kind of hit those same marks that all the other movies have made before. And so it was nothing really surprising. I was expecting it. But because the trailer, I was like, you know, maybe something crazy is going to happen. Maybe there's going to be some type of twist. And it just never happened. Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay.
But the movie's not bad. I do recommend you still check it out for those who haven't seen it. And it's still a pretty good watch.
It's not bad. It could have been better.
If you go back to the part where I mentioned that the gore should have been added a little more, and if you see the movie, you'll see what I'm talking about. Because it's like they literally cut out and toned it down too much. If it's a PG-13 movie, I understand. But you gotta understand, I'm a guy that appreciates horror movies. And if it's a horror movie, you gotta show some blood and stuff and everything else.
Granted, they did have the ear scene with Brandon. But at some point, like, I was like, oh, she's about to rip his ear off, and then it just like kept stretching, almost like taffy, and it was just like, then it just kind of got lost on me. Yeah,
I feel like they should have added like a little bit more blood, like, oh, it's peeling off, it's peeling off.
Like, no ear is just gonna keep stretching like that. It's at some point it's gonna like tear.
I'm literally trying to do it right now. Is it stretching? No, it's not.
like I want to see a skin rip. I want to see a tear. Like, they just stretched it out so much, and then when you got to the point where it's like there was like the separation of like this part of the ear with like the rest of it.
I feel like
it got cut off.
Yeah, I feel like
and it panned to her.
Yeah, it just cut off to just M3GAN, and then the ear tore off at that point, and then in the next cut, Brandon just lays down in shock. I felt like it was a little toned down. The creative differences, I believe, was a little toned down. I feel like it should have been a little over the top. I feel like they should have talked about the creative decisions with the death scenes in the movie. However, there are some good moments, like I really liked M3GAN singing. When M3GAN was singing Titanium, I didn't recognize the song at first, but then later on, the lyrics started to get to me like, okay, I get it.
I felt that was a little random.
I felt like her singing was, I thought it was pretty good, but when I was watching it in theaters, I was like, when she was singing, I was like, is this a Disney musical am I watching?
It was good for comedic effect, but at some point it was just like, this is unnecessary, and I don't know why you have this. Like, for example,
I didn't think it was unnecessary. I feel like it was good for comedic effect. I really liked her singing a lot. It was pretty good to me, but I think that showed M3GAN's way of, Katie, don't worry about it, and then breaks out in the song.
It wasn't even that. She just used that to completely avoid the situation. Like I'm saying. Let me just dismiss it. But then afterwards, like, even like during like the scene where she was about to get ripped apart by Katie, she's like, Katie, no, wait. and then she starts singing. I was like, what is this? You know, like,
I think that's her way of connecting with Katie.
It's like she didn't actually expect Katie to stop. So she's like, let me just say something to distract her. I don't even know.
Nah. But overall, this movie was still good. I felt like it was a decent movie. I thought it was good. It got a pretty good reception on Rotten Tomatoes. It's pretty good. I do highly recommend that you watch it. It was a pretty good movie, and I really enjoyed it. I really wish the gore was a bit more abundant in the movie. It's already confirmed that a sequel is already on the way in 2025. So, yeah, sequel's already been confirmed. And they hopefully, if they watch my review, you know, maybe they'll work on more creative differences.
Take some notes.
Yeah, take some notes, like add abundance of gore, add a little bit of this, add a little bit of that, add a little development to the characters a little bit more, and try to add a little abundance of gore, because it's a horror movie after all. But yeah, I feel I guess it's a horror comedy, but I feel like you should add a little bit more horror than comedy. Comedy should just be a little bit more of, you know, just for funny bits, for some comedic effect in the plot. But then if it's a horror, you gotta add like a little bit of something. Hopefully the sequel will do a little bit more justice. But anyway, I really did enjoy this movie. I hope you enjoyed our review. In my next couple of videos, I will be looking at the movie Puss in Boots: The Last Wish. I heard it was a pretty good movie, and I can't wait to watch it. And I can't wait to give it a good watch. I heard it was a pretty good movie. So I feel like, from what I heard, I think Puss in Boots 2 was actually better than Shrek 2, from what I understand. So, you know, I can't wait to actually watch it. I feel like
it's a bit hard to beat, but we'll see.
We'll see. But anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed our movie review of M3GAN. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the movie. Let us know on your thoughts on the movie in the comment section down below. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. And until then, I'm Kieran.
It's Christina.
This has been KIEREACTIONS. We'll see you in the next one. KIEREACTIONS signing out.
Bye.